Everyone's got an opinion about Simon Cowell. Some people loved watching him on TV. Others couldn't stand him. Most of us probably landed somewhere in the middle. He kept us watching, even if we weren't totally sure we liked him. But here's the thing I only realized after really looking into his past. Simon Cowell wasn't just born with that sharpness and ego, or with the sting he could deliver with a single sentence. Every bit of that, every weapon, every wall, was built over time. Piece by piece, scar by scar, rejection after rejection, long before he ever set foot in a TV studio. The story of how Simon Cowell went from a soft-spoken, overlooked kid in London to the TV judge everybody feared, and then to a man quietly undone by life, turns out to be one of the rawest, most human stories I've come across. So, let's dig in. October 7th, 1959. Lambeth, London. Simon is born into a family that, from the outside anyway, seems set. His dad, Eric, is a senior executive in the music world, a man who gets how the business works, who knows people who matter. Simon's mother, Julie, is a former ballet dancer. She's got that steady, composed grace that makes ordinary days seem a little more special. On paper, Simon had a comfortable start. Money was never tight. Life had culture, safety, all the trappings you'd expect. But one thing was missing: warmth, praise. The simple, unconditional love that every kid craves, that sense of being valued just for existing. Later on, Simon admitted, plainly, that he didn't really hear, "I'm proud of you," growing up. Barely at all. Imagine that, living in a place where success is the norm, not something to be celebrated, where your best effort is just the minimum standard. That quiet chill does something to a kid. It teaches them love is earned, not given. If you mess up, you get silence, not support. And that silence? After a while, it gets loud. School didn't offer much sanctuary either. At Radlett Prep, and then at Dover College, Simon wasn't the pupil his parents hoped for. He clashed with teachers, lost focus, stirred things up. Teachers, instead of seeing potential, saw a problem to manage. Other kids found their social groups picked their paths. Simon just drifted on the sidelines, never really fitting in, never excelling, sort of invisible. Each report card seemed to confirm his worst fear: he wasn't enough. By the time school ended, Simon left with little to show: basic qualifications, a load of shame, and an inescapable sense that he disappointed everyone who mattered. At home, where achievement was everything, he felt emotionally broke. No grand plans, no big moment of promise, just the thick, familiar disappointment. Then, through his dad's pull, because that's how these things go, he got his first job, in the mailroom at EMI Music, one of the industry's big fish. Picture that. Your dad is a player in the business. You've spent your whole life hearing music as a family business. And your job? Sorting post, making coffee, carrying other people's lunch, walking the halls where nobody even knows your name. Simon would later call those years suffocating. He was there but unseen, touching letters meant for stars, dreaming of a place in the spotlight but getting ignored at every step. The humiliation got heavy. Eventually, he quit, tried to prove himself somewhere else, realized things were even grimmer, and crept back, defeated, but still showing up. And then, slowly, something clicked. Instead of shrinking into himself, Simon started to pay attention. He watched how people won power, how hits were engineered, how audiences snapped up what they loved. While others were chasing credibility and respect, Simon took notes on how to survive. He learned that talent only gets you so far. It's connection that counts. The crowd, not the critics, decide who matters. Commercial success? That was real. Critics couldn't take that away. Bit by bit, that lost kid in the mailroom began to turn into someone else. In the early 80s, Simon took his shot, launched his first label, Fanfare Records. And for a while, it worked. His goofy pop songs topped the charts. Doors opened. Suddenly, people noticed him. He got validation for the first time, and, honestly, it was intoxicating. Then the bottom dropped out. The music business is brutal. Trends shifted, the hits dried up, and his big moment fizzled out. The people who toasted his success disappeared. Fanfare shut down. Debts piled up. Simon was broke before he hit 30. And here's the bit that really stings. He moved back home. Same childhood bedroom, same family silence, same sense of failure. He said those days almost broke him. He felt like a ghost in his own life. Friends vanished, calls stopped coming, opportunities dried up. But he didn't give up. He watched, regrouped, and went back into the business. This time wiser. At BMG in the 90s, Simon backed pop acts that cared less about reviews and more about reaching people. He aimed for the crowd, not the critics. Simple music, commercial music. Critics laughed, but the records kept selling. Still, the fear stuck with him. Every win felt shaky, every success just a moment away from disappearing. That fear, of losing it all, of going back to nothing, pushed Simon harder than any ambition ever could. Then 2001 hit, and everything flipped. Simon stepped out of the shadows and onto TV as a judge for Pop Idol. What happened after that honestly felt weird. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He was blunt, unfiltered, just plain honest, in a business built almost entirely on politeness and fake encouragement. He gave people the truth, not the version you tell to keep everyone happy. The actual truth. People ate it up. Critics called him cruel, but audiences saw honesty. Producers worried he'd scare folks off, but the exact opposite happened. There's something, most of us feel it, deep down, oddly satisfying about watching someone say what nobody else will, even when it stings, even when it's awkward. Suddenly, Simon wasn't hidden behind studio doors anymore. He was shaping pop culture, live, right in front of everyone. American Idol, The X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, all those franchises popped up everywhere. His face was everywhere. His name turned into a brand. His words were powerful enough to make TV executives sweat. For a guy who used to feel invisible, sorting envelopes while others made big moves, now the world couldn't stop watching him. But here's the twist. When power barrels in out of nowhere, it brings a quiet kind of poison with it. His schedule got wild. Flights blended together, studios became his version of sleep. Meetings took over meals. Life shrank down to sound stages, hotel rooms and contracts that never ended. Applause followed him, but real friendship faded out. People closest to him said he was always surrounded but still alone. Always performing. Even off camera, the more his public persona sharpened, the lonelier his private world became. And honestly, there's this cruel irony. Simon built his whole empire on honesty, saying what's real. But he stopped giving any of that to himself. Vulnerability, weakness, exhaustion. Just routine. Slowing down felt way too close to disappearing. And disappearing had almost swallowed him up once before. So he pushed forward. Kept performing. Just kept going. His health started cracking. He dealt with chronic pain, anxiety, insomnia, brushed off as just part of the job. Doctors warned him. He didn't listen. Listening felt like quitting, and Simon wasn't about to quit. Meanwhile, the world's view of him turned cartoonish. Tabloids called him heartless. Contestants feared him. Audiences either loved him or hated him, sometimes both. Booing wasn't rare. Memes poked fun at his facial expressions all across the internet. He handled it all quietly, convinced that showing empathy would ruin his authority. But under the sharp suits and tough talk, something was falling apart much faster. His sense of himself. Relationships broke down. Trust got hard. Victories felt empty. Later, he admitted there were nights he'd sit alone after live shows, surrounded by every sign of success, and just feel completely empty. Then came the scandal. I won't go into details because, honestly, it's not what matters here. What matters is how it hit him. For the first time, Simon wasn't the judge standing outside the story. He was inside it. The headlines were brutal. Friends backed away. The same public that used to love his honesty turned it on him. And this time, honesty couldn't protect him. The fall? It wasn't about money. It wasn't about ratings. It was deeper. It cut where power and wealth can't reach. And he had to face it. Real accountability, with no applause. Quiet, with no clear escape. And under all that, something terrifying. The empire he built couldn't protect him from himself. Then, August 2020. This story honestly stunned me. Simon was at his place in Malibu in the courtyard. He climbed onto a powerful electric bike. Didn't really know how strong it was. One moment of confidence, a wrong move, and he got thrown violently to the ground. His spine took the full hit. 6 hours of surgery, metal rods in his back. Doctors spoke in careful tones, the kind that quietly terrify you. One mistake during recovery and he might never walk again. One slip and everything could vanish. The man who spent years making decisions for others now couldn't control his own body. He was stuck in a hospital bed, struggling just to sit up. Breathing hurt. Lifting a glass of water made his hands shake. Instead of studio applause, he heard the sterile beep of monitors. Nights were long and hostile. Pain pulsed through his spine like it was paying off a debt. During those dark, quiet hours, Simon wasn't thinking about TV ratings or shows or fame. He was thinking about his son, Eric, a kid too young to figure out why his dad couldn't lift him, why they couldn't run around the garden anymore, why dad just couldn't get up. Simon said later that lying there in that hospital bed, imagining Eric growing up with only memories, not with a father, that stung most, not the physical pain, that feeling. Recovery was slow, humiliating, and rough. Friends saw him as thinner, quieter, hollowed out. TV went on without him. Auditions happened without him. Life kept moving. That reality hit hard. It was always possible, but now it was real. He wasn't irreplaceable. The machine worked fine without its creator. Just as he started standing again, literally learning to stand, a second bike accident hit him in early 2022. Shattered arm, bruised face. Headlines came back. Less sympathetic, more mocking. For Simon, it felt like a message written deep in his bones. Control? An illusion. Invincibility? Yeah, just a story he'd told himself. Then came a loss that was worse than anything physical. Liam Payne. If you don't know, Liam was in One Direction, a group Simon put together on the X Factor. A teenager, nervous and full of hope, his life changed by Simon's yes. Fame, career, everything started there. Liam's sudden death didn't just hurt Simon, it made him question everything he'd tried not to think about. He helped build a system that pushed young people to wild heights, but what did those heights cost? Liam's death forced him to see that dreams always carry weight. Fame makes joy, and pain bigger. And sometimes, the endings can't be rewritten. Simon went quiet in a way his friends had never seen. Projects paused. Calls went unanswered. Privately, he replayed old audition tapes, watching a kid who had trusted him completely. The guilt, even without blame, was silent and suffocating. And so here is where we find Simon Cowell now. At 65, a man who has lived at every extreme, invisible and all-powerful, bankrupt and billionaire, alone in a hospital bed, and surrounded by the noise of global success. Pain did something that power never could. It slowed him down enough to think, to remember, to reflect on a life spent running from a childhood that never felt safe, and toward a future that never quite arrived in the shape he imagined. Fatherhood arrived late, but it arrived with force. Eric became his anchor. The man who once lived by ratings and deadlines learned to live by bedtime routines and school runs. He discovered the strange miracle of repetition, reading the same story night after night, hearing the same laughter echo through the house. Moments that once would have felt completely insignificant now carried enormous weight. He has spoken about fatherhood as feeling like being allowed to revisit life from a completely different angle. Not as the overlooked boy desperate to be seen, but as the adult determined to see someone else fully. The love he gives his son is the love he once waited for himself, and in giving it, something inside him finally settled. He also changed how he thinks about legacy. For most of his life, legacy meant empire, ownership, global reach, the biggest franchise, the most countries, the most viewers. Now it means something quieter, more intentional. He has spoken about not wanting Eric to inherit vast wealth, but to inherit values, discipline without cruelty, confidence without arrogance, success without emptiness, foundations quietly expanded, scholarships multiplied. Programs supporting children's health and creative education grew, without spectacle, without his name plastered all over them. For once, recognition wasn't the goal. Repair was. Even his relationship with his own appearance shifted. After years of attempting to outpace age, and we've all noticed the various, interventions along the way, bless him, he stopped. The mirror no longer needed to cooperate. He admitted that not recognizing himself in photographs had been more frightening than any headline, and in letting go of that obsession with control, he finally found something that looked a little bit like peace. And when he sits behind the judge's desk now, something is different. The silence before his words lasts a little longer. His gaze lingers. The sharpness is still there. This is still Simon Cowell, after all, but it's tempered by something deeper. Experience. He understands now, in a way he didn't before, how fragile courage is, how exposed hope feels when you place it in front of a crowd, how devastating a careless word can become when someone carries it home in silence. He still judges, but he also listens, and he no longer sees a trembling stranger standing at a microphone as a commodity, or a problem to solve, or a moment of television to be managed. He sees a person at the edge of possibility, someone who reminds him of who he once was, restless, unseen, hungry for someone to finally say, "Yes, you're enough." And so this is where I want to leave you, lovely, because I think the Simon Cowell story, the real one, not the tabloid version, not the meme version, not the high-waisted trousers villain version, is actually one of the most quietly universal stories there is. It's about what happens when you grow up without being told you're enough. How that gap shapes every decision you make, every relationship you build, every empire you construct, because really, deep down, you're still just trying to fill that original empty space, still trying to earn the approval that should have been given freely, unconditionally, by the people who were supposed to love you first. And it's about what happens when life, through pain, through loss, through a body that finally refuses to cooperate, through the face of a child looking up at you, finally cracks that armor open. And underneath all the power and the performance and the very expensive suits, there's just a person. Scared. Still figuring it out. Still learning. Still hoping that when everything goes quiet, it will have meant something. Power ages. Fame dissolves. Bodies fail. But empathy, once truly learned, once genuinely arrived at, through the hard way, through all of this, doesn't leave. It stays. Quietly. Permanently. Long after the final applause. I'd love to know what you thought of this one. Did Simon Cowell's story surprise you? Did any part of it land somewhere personal? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read every single one. And if this made you see him a little differently, maybe share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.